Hello everyone and welcome back to another Strategoi video. This is actually a very typical welcome back, or atypical I should say welcome back, because we're doing a part 2 of a review and we've never done that before. Usually we've been able to squeeze in everything we want to say about a battletome within the 3 hours that we want to stick to. But now for the part 2 of the Soulblight Gravelords battletome review, we're going to dive into our favorite war scrolls and 2 lists, one Legion of Blood list and one Avengorii list. Once again, I'm joined here by my co-host Ryan, who's been covering part 1 with me, and we're gonna dive into part 2 right now.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Yep, happy to have you. Okay, so the favorite war scrolls, if you've listened to part 1, you know that both me and Ryan have been talking non-stop about the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, so obviously he had to make the cut. Graveguards are also fantastic. They were good in the first book. They're fantastic in the second book as well. Neferata and Lauka Vai are also very strong in their respective sub-factions. And then I've added the Deadwalker Skeletons and the Wight King that I mistyped here. He's very white.
Yeah, I mean, you can paint him that way if you want.
Jesus. That is one very white king on Steed. Yeah, okay, that was very unintentional. Just let the record show. Ryan, I made this list kind of without consulting you, sort of. Would you have added different units to this list?
So, in going through all the different comparisons with what was in the book, we wanted to get this book out, or this review out, sooner than later. And I'm about to leave for Serbia tomorrow to start training for Worlds. So I had kind of a time crunch. While my girlfriend was sleeping, I was actually going through for hours on end, analyzing all the differences with these units. And so by the time we got around to recording this video, I had only just finished doing so and making my own list. And I don't feel like I got a really good sense for what I would say got the big glow ups and everything.
Yeah.
That said, so if we do a coming back to the book kind of review a few months down the road, I think I'll have a better sense for this. But you know, I don't know. I'd probably say I'd agree. I definitely agree. He was always on the top of my list. I would probably add the regular zombie dragon in here, which you could kind of group in here, because I really like that it feels differentiated from the Terrorgeist, and then it can deep strike now, which he can't do. And of course, I'm trying to build a big kind of Timmy monster list sometimes, and see if I can Johnny my way into it being good. Neferata, I totally agree. I'm curious what you're going to say about the skeletons. But I do like that the Wight King on Steed amplifies the Blood Knights, and
Black Knights.
Black Knights. Sorry, Black Knights, and that that the Black Knights are default battle line, or whatever, in the best sub faction, Neferata sub faction. I feel like a lot of what we're leaning into here is reflective of what's changed with the sub factions and kind of the diversification. For example, the Wight King on Steed is now a bit different than the Wight King on foot, which is good. That's a good change. I like seeing that something becomes a little bit more niche-y for his own version. It has a faster. So, I think I generally agree with where you're going with. Maybe with further, introspection on this, I might come up with a couple others. But I like this list.
Okay. I really hope I didn't mess up the spelling on the Wight King's specific slides, but we'll see. That's full-on anticipation for me here. Okay, so let's start off with the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon. He is by far I would say, the most impactful war scroll in the book, simply because he is such a good recipient for both command traits and artifacts. He's very strong without them. He's even better with them. So he's just very good. For 400 points, for 440 points, you get a fantastic melee profile that also doesn't allow your opponent's units within 3 inches to use Inspiring Presence, which is huge. The reasons why you would pick this unit usually is because just in any sub faction, you would be happy to have him because he has amazing synergies with their artifacts and combat command traits. His damage is phenomenal, especially with how easy it is to buff his damage, and his healing through the improved version of the Hunger, for example, is also great. Also keep in mind he gets to choose a spell from the Lore of Vampire, so you could go for Vile Transference, but if you want to go full damage, you could just as well take Flaming Weapon here. That fits well on either the lands because you value their high rend, or the claws because you value the volume of attacks. So either way, you can't really go wrong with the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon. What do you love about him, Ryan?
Well, he was always good. The fact I like having a hero that can keep up with your other stuff if you want to play a fast list.
That can keep up with your other stuff?
He can keep up with, like, movement wise.
Yeah.
And he's on a big ass base, so he's projecting a big bubble for things that you need him to do. Obviously, Prince Vordry is built from the same kit, so, and of course the other two, the non-hero versions of these. So the kit's great and flexible. You could, of course, not glue him to the models. Practical too. The Zombie Dragon, the no inspiring presence thing is on the regular Zombie Dragon too, so it's not per se for him, but it is for the Zombie Dragon. I kind of wish they'd made a Vampire on Terrorgeist variant. That would be cool. So you had an option for that as well. But other things, like you said, he's got more wounds. We said earlier, he's got a better breath, like everything in 3rd edition now, where it's only 4 levels and takes a while before he starts getting hit with it. He did lose his once per game D6 heal, once per battle D6 heal, but the Hunger's better, so it works out. His spell is 1 casting value higher, but now it triggers on a 3+ instead of a 4+, which is a lot. And then the Pestilential Breath on all of these things with Pestilential Breath has changed quite a bit. It is an actual shooting profile now, so it can be used for Unleash Hell. It got 3 inches of extra range. It's still a 3+ to hit in principle, but it's gotten a little bit better with some the wound and the rend. It got flipped around. The rend used to be -3 and then did D6 damage. Now it's only -1 and does 3 damage. So the whole shooting profile got kind of flipped around a bit, but I still think it's pretty solid. The lance is, I think, it's basically in the same place it was before, but they added rend to its non-charging state. They pulled the damage down on the charge, so it doesn't do quite as much on the charge, which is one reason to maybe think about flaming. The sword, no one's really taking, but it did get buff. Snapping Maw got +1 rend, but its D6 damage got changed to 3 damage, which is under the expected value of a D6, so in a sense it got worse. I feel like I wrote summary notes under every single unit and what I thought about it. And on this guy, I said that I thought of him as kind of a side grade because he was already good. I don't want to shit on him. He was already good. I feel like it's kind of a side grade for going up 20 points as well. But he's definitely techier, with especially turning off Inspiring Presence. And then how many, like you said, as a recipient for your command traits and artifacts, he's just kind of, to me, he's basically an auto take unless you're playing a ground game where you're playing a lot of slower army stuff and you don't need someone that's as kind of melee buildy as he is.
Yeah.
So,
but
I like it.
For the longest time, I've played Soulblight lists without a Vampire Lord and a Zombie Dragon because every time I used him, he fluked all his attacks, so I always missed with the lands, and then he's just very lackluster. But now what I kind of like is that he's not only there for the damage, right? That's still his main goal, and it's still the reason why you want him. But the Inspiring Presence is also nice in different ways, and as you mentioned, it's a little bit techier, and I always like that. That the unit is just not one thing, or meant for one thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I would consider, if it weren't for how expensive the units were, instead of taking a list that has 2 zombie dragons or Terrorgeist, whatever, for Avengorii, I would consider actually taking 2 of him, just so you've got a couple sources of this, because having 2 of him doesn't cause redundancy issues, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So there's nothing wrong if you like the monster itself, but want another artifact recipient or another source of no inspiring presence. He's still pretty good. The only thing that's redundant is his spell.
Yeah,
So.
and it's not even bad running two of them, and even you could. I even used to run two of them with Neferata and Legion of Blood, for example, because the other units in Soulblight can be so cheap to fill out your battle line, and with the Resurrection, you always have a steady flow of fodder, I guess, lying around. That it doesn't really hurt you to put all of your points or most of your points into heroes.
Right.
So that's kind of cool. I would also, as you mentioned, like if they had a Vampire Lord on Terrorgeist, that would have been awesome. I 100% agree. I actually have my Vampire Lord on a Terrorgeist modeled because it just looks so much better. Their Terrorgeist has such a menacing pose, and they really did something weird with the zombie dragon here. I don't know why. It's probably the head, but the head is really, oh god. I mean, can you imagine how would he close his mouth when he was alive?
I don't know. Yeah, that tongue is a little. Well, is it because of the tongue, or is it?
No,
is it because
I mean literally, his mouth cannot close. If you close his jaws, bone doesn't move, right? So it looks like he's snarling here, but he can't snarl because he has no flesh on his head. So
Wow.
So if you close those jaws, there's just a gaping hole where our lip. I don't know. He must have had massive lips when he was alive. I don't know.
Wow, an animal biologist. All of a sudden, I didn't realize this was one of your.
Oh yeah, no,
Wow.
this is really a pet peeve for me.
Yeah,
Not gonna lie. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have the Vordry on the actual zombie dragon, and I still haven't painted him just because I feel somewhere inside my body that I might start with OBR at some point, and then use the head that comes in the guy that puts all his skeletons in his baskets. He also has a dragon sort of head that I might swap it out for that one. So
Yeah, I traded my, or didn't trade, I just gave my Karazai head from my Karazai Krondus kit to one of my friends so that he could use it on his zombie dragon. So
good on you. That's a great headpiece. Okay. The Grave Guards. Man, oh man. In Warhammer Fantasy, I used to run these guys. They were an absolute blender. In Warhammer Age of Sigmar, they're an absolute blender. In first edition, they were alright. Second edition, they were amazing. And in third edition, they're still very, very good. I would say that with all of our war scrolls, if you're playing against this army, you won't notice a difference. Most of the things still kind of do what they used to do, like Graveguard still do damage. But when you're playing with them yourself, when you're piloting the army yourself, you're gonna notice these little differences. And for example, with Graveyard, their damage is still very reliable. The wound rolls on 6 inflict a mortal wound in addition. They're summonable, so you can bring them back. And now they hit on 4s, but wound on 3s with the great weapons, which used to be the other way around, I think. Or is it now the other way around? No, it is now 4s and 3s, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Which helps because you get to hit more with all-out attack. And they also have very good command units because one of their command units always says that they're at least gonna do a charge of 6 inches, which is great. Yeah. And the other one allows you to re-roll your Deathless Minion wards of 1. So I probably can't say this to a mathematician, but in my head, and I know that's not the case, Ryan, but in my head, it almost feels like a 5-up wards. I know it's not the same, but please don't shoot me.
Well, let's see. So 1/6 chance that you pass it. If you need a 6-up, let me just quickly look at the thing real quick. I don't, because a 5-up is obviously a 33% chance, right?
Yes. So a 5-up would be a 1 in 3 chance, and one rerolling ones it is a little bit worse, I guess.
It is definitely worse.
Yeah.
But it does make a difference. So we're re-rolling ones on a D6, and if you need a 6+, it goes up to 19%. So from what was it before, a 16 point, well, almost a 17. So it doesn't go up that much, but you know, it's still something. It helps.
Yeah, and there are ways in this book to improve your ward save to a 5-up anyway. So having a 5-up with rerolling ones is quite good. You could also go for the shield variant and improve your 5-up armor save to a 4-up armor save. I've seen a lot of people considering that now for the first time. Honestly, in my eyes, they're still just a blender that they need to be, and I don't really think that a 4+ is gonna be a good anvil. I would rather use cheap hordes for that.
Yeah, and here's the thing: is you can still bring them back. So
yeah,
you can in multiple ways.
And
so
they're only 140 for 10.
Yeah, and that hasn't changed. They didn't go up any. A lot of units went up a good bit. Yeah, I agree with you. And plus 1 inch range on the Great Blades is this unit is just amazing. I just don't like the models, and I don't like pushing around. I mean, they're a great elite unit, but aren't they on smaller bases?
Yes, they're on 25 mils.
Yeah.
Makes it even better, right? That's the thing, right? Bring 2 blocks of 20 that you can realistically bring back once each for 10. So you basically get 20 Graveguard for free. And even a unit of 10 is actually quite menacing in certain situations. So, man, I don't know what rules writer loves the Graveguard this much, but they either want to get rid of their old sculpts really fast, or there's something else going on here. But I mean, these guys are amazing.
They're not in the new Vanguard box, right?
I
think it's skeletons.
Skeletons.
And
Vargeists and
Vampire Lord on foot.
Yes, obviously. And then what's a monster? No, that can't be.
Blood Knights.
Maybe Blood Knights. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's a 20 block of skeletons. So these guys used to be in the Start Collecting box with the White King on or Steed. Maybe it was Steed. Which is a bummer that you can't get him for discounted because this unit's so good. But anyway, they've always been good, and they just got better. So for no points increase.
I love to run them in Virgos because they got the +1 to hit there, and +1 to Moon maybe as well. I don't know. The old Virgos rule, and that just made them even more menacing. But there's still a lot of ways you can buff these guys up now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the part for me is just like, even though they are elite, people don't use them as elite. They use them as like a block of 20 dudes, and then they keep coming back. So it still feels like you're pushing hordes around. And there's a part of me that's just like, that's just not my play style. But no, they're better than Namarti. I mean, arguably, depending on what you're trying to do. But you still have 40 Namarti thralls, so maybe I'm a total hypocrite, and it's something to do with the fact that they look like skeletons. So
yeah, you just hate skeletons, Ryan.
The funny thing is, back when the original Nagash model was a thing, I played undead, like in Warhammer Fantasy Battle, like
kind of showing your age there, but okay.
Yeah, I have him still. And, And so I used to love undead back when that was a thing, and something's changed to me. I don't know what it is. I'm just not inspired by it anymore. But yeah. All right, let's move on.
If you're an ancient vampire just like Ryan is, and you kind of want to hate comment me because I made fun of him that way, please do support Ryan.
What is it? Believe all old people.
Yep.
Yeah. Something like that. No, joke. That's just a joke. All right.
Okay. Moving on. Neferata. Well, we've both hyped her up in part one, so I think we've said most of what's to say about her. But for 390 points, which is quite a price tag, but you really get it for a bargain in Legion of Blood, just because she almost adds 2 battle traits to that sub-faction, right?
Yeah, 3.
Yeah. So you get a lot of shenanigans during deployment. You get to I can't say redeploy. Reset her up. and add D3 units to also set up those again. And keep in mind, in Legion of Blood, you probably want to run at least 1 or probably 2 Vampire Lords on Zombie Dragons, and they are going to be your big damage dealers together with Neferata. And the biggest downside to them was that they could be out deployed, right? They could just, if you had to drop them first, your opponent could just drop a tar pit in front of them, and that would give you a hard time. And there was Amethystine Pinions to get around that a little bit, but now that that's gone, you really want to have that benefit of deploying them in the best way possible, and she allows that. She also allows you to deploy for survivability rather than for aggression, and her spell is just amazing to make a unit unrendable, but you can still improve them with all-out attack or all-out defense or other buffs. So put that on a unit of Blood Knights or even on a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon who already have a 3-up save. Add a Mystic Shield or all-out defense on top of that, and that's a unit with a 2+ save that can never be modified to anything worse. So that is very good.
But only Legion of Blood. So.
Only Legion of Blood now, yeah, that is true. She's also a decent melee combatant. She has the Dagger of Jet rule, where if you put a wound on a hero but you've not killed them, then I think just on a 5+, right? You just slay him outright.
Yeah.
And that's any hero. There is nothing else in the text about what kind of hero. So that just make sure your opponent knows that if you're playing against a big monster, because that's going to keep her safe for a much longer time. Because they just cannot take the risk. I mean, let's take Alariel or even Archeon, for example. Does Archeon have a rule that avoids him being slain, like Marathi, from a one-shot ability?
No.
So yeah, she can deal with those if you're lucky. I wouldn't pair her up against them necessarily just to bank on that effect, but it's a nice extra.
Yeah, so she's got 5 attacks on that profile, 3/3 -2/1. So one of those attacks has to go through, and then, but you don't roll for every attack that goes through. So it's still a 5-up no matter what. So you just need 1 to go through, and then you're on a rolling a dice that's better than Purple Sun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So great piece, especially in Legion of Blood.
Yeah, she gained 40 points. Like you were saying, she's pretty costy, but like she got 2 wounds, a better bracket. She's a generic War Master even outside of Legion of Blood. Her hunger, she's actually one of the people that got hit by the hunger update because she was the only one that could heal D6 instead of D3.
Yeah.
So technically, her expected value was a little higher, so she's not doing enough wounds to make it up, then she's going to get hit with it. Lady Annika was the other one that healed entirely.
Mm-hmm.
But she gained that pre-game redeploy is totally new. And Twilight's Allure, which is the... I'm sorry, which one is that? That Twilight's Allure is the -1 to hit with melee weapons. That used to be a command ability. So you're saving a CP. You see that in 3rd edition abilities.
Yeah.
But it's only Legion of Blood now, but at least it's for her no matter where you take it. She lost the Death Lord's keyword, but I don't think that impacts anything. I don't even know what that means. Her Akhmet Har got -1 to hit, so it got a little worse to hit, but it got +1 rend, so that helps it get through. And her other weapon got +1 attack. Worth pointing out, anything with Spectral Claws and Daggers lost its ability to do mortal wounds on 6s, but it did get +1 to hit. So that's the mount, essentially, or the ghosts, whatever it might be.
Yeah, it's
not doing a whole lot of work. It's just kind of there to be there. So yeah, I would definitely say that Neferata inside her sub-faction is an auto-take and is pretty solid in general, but I don't know if I would take her outside of her sub-faction for her points cost.
Yeah. In that way, they kind of did right by all the named heroes for their respective sub-factions. And I think that's the way to go, honestly, that you reward people for taking them in a sub-faction, just really enabling that sub-faction. Do keep in mind, if you've not played with Neferata before, maybe because you didn't really think Legion of Blood was good before, she might look like a blender piece on paper, but do take this from me. That's not who she is. So she can deal with small units, she can deal with heroes, but don't expect her to just blend a unit like a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, because that's not what she does.
Yeah.
Okay, on to our different centerpiece here for a different sub-faction. So Lauka Vai in Avengorii is an absolute monster. Well, she's always a monster, but in a different sense. And she's only 300 points. For what she brings to the table, I thought it was a bargain, honestly. Her damage is fantastic. She enables 2 monsters rampages for Avengorii monsters, I think. Her spell is pretty good. She is very strong.
So I took her in my Avengorii list, as you'll see, but I feel like that's an obvious choice. So she, her hunger, she's got the better hunger. She's a generic War Master now. She lost impact hits. She used to have impact hits. And along with the Avengorii Lord, they no longer have to roll for the battle round to see if she can run and charge versus not being able to do command abilities, which a lot of people forgot anyway. So, who cares? Her Queen Amongst Monsters ability that gives 2 monstrous rampages used to be a command ability that's not an ability, and it used to give +1 to hit for your monsters versus the target unit. So, I don't know. I feel like that's a side grade. It's cool to be able to do 2 monstrous rampages. Getting to do more with your toys is always. But +1 to hit could have been nice if you stacked it right and got your things. But it was a CP, so it's kind of a trade-off there. Her old spell, Death's Downpour, which had halved the charge of units within 12 inches, was replaced with this 6-inch pile-in for Avengorii monsters, which I think that's also kind of a side grade, right? It depends on what you're trying to do with it. And if you're not building into Avengorii monsters that really could use that 6-inch pile-in, then maybe having the charge for some other unit was better. Her attacks got a lot better. +1 attack and rend for her main weapon. The Gorgon's Talons got +1 hit, wound, and rend, but the damage went from D6 to 3, fixed 3. The Impaling Tail got +1 rend. So, in general, she for 20 extra points, she just got buffed to hell, but she really needs to be taken in Avengorii, which, like you said, is kind of the trend that they're following here. The only real question is, do you find the model ugly or not? A lot of people do. A lot of people don't. I'm somewhere in between, I guess. But I still think it's worth taking.
I think the top looks fine, the bottom looks fine, but together it looks weird.
Yeah. It would be better if she was just riding the thing.
Yeah, I actually, for my conversion for a Avengorii Lord, I used Yndrasta's model, and I replaced her angelic wings with Vargheist wings that I have left over. And placed a vampire head on her, and it looks amazing.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah, so Lauka Vai, thumbs up from me, rule-wise, love her.
I never really saw people using her before. It was mainly using regular Avengorii.
Yeah, but she was terrible because she had to be your centerpiece, I guess, but her rule made her so unreliable because she could not just in certain rounds she just couldn't do any command abilities, for example, because she was enraged or something, and that was such a derpy ass rule that people just never ran her.
Yeah, I forgot to mention, maybe you did too, but she does still give the -1 rend to enemy units within 3 inches.
Yeah, I didn't mention it, no, but it's good that you do now. Yeah,
but I mean that ability was what you could get on the Avengorii Lord too. So I think what ended up happening is, like you say, you can't use the command ability sometimes. Might as well just run the Avengorii Lord for a little bit cheaper. I think it was like 20 points cheaper.
Yeah, so. I think the Avengorii Lord also had a better spell, Blood Clots or something, or Blood. I know, but a better spell.
Yeah.
Anyway, Deadwalker Skeletons. So here we are, Ryan, with your question: why did I pick these guys as my favorite war scroll? Okay, so first of all, what I love about Deadwalker Skeletons is they're only 85 points for 10 models, which is not cheap for their price point, but just cheap as an overall filler for lists. I've had so many instances where I feel like something didn't really fit into my lists as well, and or just I have some points left over and I'm filling it with endless spells that I don't really need. And then just 85 points of extra skeletons is always nice to have on hand. and being able to fill your battle line with super cheap units just so you can take, for example, a lot of big-ass vampire lords and zombie dragons is super cool. One of the rules that got changed was how they resurrect in combat now. So before, after they activate it, I think, or when they activate it, you roll the 4+ for each model that died that turn, if I remember correctly, and then for each 4+, one came back.
I believe it was that phase even.
Or that phase, yeah. So now it's at the start of combat, you roll an amount of dice equal to the models that were killed from that unit at any given time. So if your unit used to be 20 and you've got 9 left, you're rolling 11 dice. And it doesn't really matter when those 11 guys died. And on a 4+, they come back. So
technically what you just said, sorry to interrupt, is at any time, which means if they had come back and you'd killed them, you get to roll for all the extra ones you brought back.
Yeah.
You just mean how many are missing from unit size.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Thank you for clarifying. So that is quite good because you get to fight on well, I wouldn't say full strength, but you're fighting on a decent strength here. You're gonna resurrect more often, and it keeps them alive for a longer time. The downside to bringing them now, and that is a thing that happened not on their war scroll but on the necromancers. There was this trick with Van Helsdans Macabre that you could cast on them and they could fight twice and thus resurrect twice. Now the fight twice happens in the hero phase, fight twice. The fighting happens in the hero phase with Van Hels, so it wouldn't resurrect them because it's only at the start of the combat phase. Still though, they're super cheap, they're summonable, so you can resurrect them as well. They're very good screens and they have fantastic command models. Just like their Graveguards, they get reroll ones on their Deathless minion saves, and they always make charges of at least 6 inches. It's also very easy to buff them now with a lot of abilities that makes them very survivable, and if you bring them in big units, they're also quite good at tar pitting because resurrecting and healing these guys is easy. So I kind of value them quite highly now. I think where the internet was a big fan of zombies in the previous book, now they're kind of shifting towards skeletons. I'm not really on either side. I just had to pick one of the two, so that's why I went with skeletons, because I feel like they made the funnest change, I guess.
They also got +1 Ren if they outnumber the target unit.
Yeah.
If I were building around the 3 types of Horde units, I would go with Graveguard. I know people will argue they're not Horde, but they come back enough that it feels like it.
Yeah.
The thing with these guys, these would probably be my second choice. I feel like 20 zombies is just the opposite of what I want to be bringing for the MSU of something.
Mm-hmm.
And considering these guys probably are better now, and they've got a much better save than the zombies too, right? They're 5 up as opposed to 6 up now.
No, do we have 6 up now?
Zombies have 6 now. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's nice.
Yeah. But it's still not my kind of unit. But I agree. When I wrote my summary, I wrote they got a huge buff, except for the champ. It turns out the champ is actually -1 to hit what it used to be. But not that matters. That's a super small difference. Mm-hmm. Being able to resurrect based off who's dead before you even start fighting means you don't have to wait to fight, which was always a timing issue for this unit, right?
Yeah.
I'm glad Van Hels, we're not going to talk about it further, but I'm glad Van Hels is gone. That's the normal version of it.
I loved it, but I understand why.
With the zombies not having to charge and then getting to fight twice, I was just like, go fuck yourself. I don't. The first time I played against that was against. He wasn't actually running them; he was running Seraphon, but it was a doubles tournament. The other buddy was running it, and I was like, "What the hell just happened? I have no idea. I didn't know you could do that." It's such a feel bad thing. I wish they'd really get rid of it, but unfortunately, this book has given it to at least like 2 extra units. So I don't think it's going anywhere. The 6-inch pylon. I guess I should just be grateful the zombies lost it. So
yeah, I use Van Hels on the Grave Guards just for ultimate blender potential.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the last one, I chose this one more as a kind of meme, I suppose. Well, not a meme. He's good, but also because he's a little bit memeable, I suppose. So for 160, you get the Wight King. Yes, I typed it correctly here. Thank God. He's quite tanky. He's summonable, which is new, so you can resurrect him and heal him easily. And he improves the charge ability from the Black Knights, which is the only reason why you would take him is when you're running a lot of Black Knights, or at least a big blob of them, or at least 10, maybe in squads of 5. It enables what we would call the Black Knight's bomb. So for each Black Knight model that makes a charge move, once it hits the target that they've charged, you get to roll 2 dice per model, and on a 5 they do a mortal wound. Now
it is double what it used to be.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it used to be D3, right? It's just flat out D3 damage.
Okay, right. So, but rolling 2 dice, means it ends up working out more. And as long as 3 guys are bigger.
Definitely. And with the Wight King nearby, you get to do it on a 4+, which is nice because let's say you're running a big block of 10 Black Knights. They don't all have to be within 1 inch. Just one of those guys has to make a charge. You make a charge, you roll 20 d6s, and with the Wight King close by, you get to do a mortal wounds on every 4. So statistically speaking, that's 10 mortal wounds right out of the gates, which is nothing to sniff at.
It goes up 50%. The output is 50% higher than it was without the Wight.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say that their damage afterwards is good, but he also has a charge ability, I think, that to inflict D6 mortal wounds or something.
It's D3.
D3
on a 2-up.
On a 2-up, that there is. I wouldn't say their damage is good after the mortal wounds, but they're still, if you're running 10 in 1 unit, that's still 20 wounds to chew through, and it's healable and summonable. So yeah, and resurrectable.
Yeah. While I'm on the topic of looking at what's changed on this guy, he used to have reroll 1s to a unit as a command ability. Now it's just an ability, the one you're talking about, which is I'd say an upgrade.
Yeah.
But while I'm on this topic, him along with a lot of heroes got plus 1 or 2 attacks on their melee profile, and notably, if their damage was D3, it's been flattened out to 2, so the average.
Mm-hmm.
This is almost entirely consistent across the book, which is an interesting choice. GW is trying to really make it a little more tournament friendly, in the sense that it's more reliable. What it's going to spike with 3, you're not going to go under with 1. It's going to be right there at 2. Some people, that's not going to be. They're going to find that trade-off, but I think people that want to know what their guy is going to do, this is a pretty good thing to have, and that's true of almost all the heroes in the updated book. So
yeah, I love those changes. Not only because it's tactically more something that you can keep in mind or can count on, I guess. But it's also just less dice rolling that's not really necessary. I didn't really feel happy to roll for my damage afterwards again. It didn't really hype me up or anything. So
for example, like lore-wise, Eternal Conflags in Tzeentch, the Flamers have D3 damage still, even though it's a 3rd edition book. But that kind of makes sense because Tzeentch is all about like everything's changing, everything's in flux.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, I think most of the time that doesn't make as much sense lore-wise, and it does speed the game up. So why not?
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So that's the 6 warscrolls I chose. I could have added in zombies because sure they're not the powerhouse that they used to be. I think we were all pleasantly surprised, and everyone was on the hype train in the online Soulblight community when the 2nd edition book came out. Like, wow, we can finally do damage with zombies, and they get a 6-inch pile-in and mortal wounds on 6 to hit. You can improve their attacks from different sources. And now they're something completely different. They do mortal wounds when they die on a 5+, which is also quite cool because if you're dropping a unit of 20 zombies as a screen in front of somebody and they have to charge them and they have to deal with them at some point, they're basically killing themselves. And there's still ways with the corpse guard to give them 6 up mortal wounds. So yeah, I still think they have a purpose. I just wouldn't run 3 units of 60, for example.
Before we move on, I want to throw in some Ryan the fact things since we're doing 2 videos on this and we've got time. If you're okay with it,
go for it.
Virko's Bloodborne have a pre-game 10-inch move for each unit of 3 that you take, which can be a game-winning thing if you play it right. So even outside of Virko's, granted they're in the Cursed City box, so a lot of times, as we covered in our GHB review, you can't start the game controlling an objective. But they move 10 inches, which is more than almost anyone gets to do before the game, which is enough to definitely get on that objective, no matter where it is. They've got the hunger now. They're 3 attacks, 3 -1/2. Yeah, they're a glass cannon unit of 3 wounds, 6 up save. But I actually think they've got some play just to go grab an objective right off the bat, so your opponent can't easily get more if they end up taking the turn. I think they got to glow up. I'm also going to say we should just really quickly address.
Because what? Sorry, you dropped off there for a sec.
We should address Nagash.
Oh yeah.
We got an update for the first time in a long time. Mm-hmm. The short version is unlimited unbinds, no longer unlimited arcane bolts. That only gets the 1. He's got his bracket ended up balancing out where he's casting. We're not worried about his number of pluses to casting, unbinding, dispelling. It's fixed at 3. And then mostly what he's doing is protecting your guys, either bringing them back with wounds characteristic of 3 or more that he can do to start at hero phase for each summonable let's say in this case summonable unit wholly within range of the ability, which is 24 inches if he's not bracketed. He gets to bring back stuff, so it's just amping up everything you've already got going on. He's got a ward save that he's giving out, a 12-inch holy within bubble of 5+, and he can bring once per hero phase. He can bring back a unit. So that means you could bring back 2 units in a given turn with a replacement unit that's half size. So I actually think there's a list to be made with Nagash that's super interesting now that he's gotten these kind of tweaks. He does cost basically half your list, but he's all the magic you'll need if you're being honest. He counts as general, so he's giving an 18-inch bubble. He gives himself his own hill. And he's bringing back a crazy amount of your dudes. So if you can just protect him, and he's not bad in combat, but you might want. I actually think Nagash has got some play around now, even though you are giving up half your choices. What do you think?
Well, I'm gonna get to the Bloodborne in a second as well because I'm so happy that you mentioned those because they were almost on my in my top 6 list. Nagash I'm a bit down on, sad to say. I really don't like any model costing that many points. It's just ridiculous. It's hard to balance if you really want to make a model worth paying almost 1,000 points for. You just need to make it more flexible than he is now. Sure, he's good at casting, but in Soulblight Gravelords, what spells are you wanting to cast that easily? Especially because it's on an unmodified roll of 9. So if Nagash's buffs would count, then we're talking a whole different game here. Sure, he's a fantastic caster, but I don't really need fantastic casters to win. Contrary to, let's say, Lumineth, where I really need spells to win. I don't need that. Those spells help me, but I don't need spells. I need damage and I need survivability. And Nagash is good at survivability with his 5+ ward, his massive healing, so that's good. But how many hordes are you going to be able to bring if you've only got 1,000 points left? Because keep in mind, we're also always playing in a certain General's Handbook season, and now it's GC season, so Galician Champion. So I already have to pay for the Galician Champion as well. So yeah, I'm not big on him. So I'm super curious what kind of list that you would like to build within. So please do, and I'll try it out for you.
But you go with a whole bunch of bodies. It's not my kind of list, but you go with a whole bunch of bodies that benefit from bringing stuff back. And remember, you just said in the previous video that 2 Vampire Lords on Zombie Dragons are viable because you still have enough guys you can bring back. 2 Vampire Lords and Zombie Dragons are only about 80 points cheaper than Nagash, and neither one's a GC.
Yeah.
So we're still in the same conversation, yet he's doing much more synergy with your army.
Well, we're not in the same conversation per se, because they can be at 2 different places at once.
It's true. It's true. I don't know. I think I like where Nagash sits right now, and better than where he previously was. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah. Well,
Nick, I know Nick wants to run a FEC list with him, where he's just bringing all of his guys back, a hordes list, which is kind of. I do think you need to run him with bodies to make up for him. Like, you're not going to run elite around Nagash. That's not what. What do you want to say about the Virkos?
Yeah, so the Bloodborne, I was super hyped thanks to the ability that the pre-game move actually for the 10 inches, exactly the point that you made. That's so good. And their footprint is small enough that you can usually hide them behind decent filled terrains, boards that are decently filled with terrain. So if you get a 10-inch move, it's not unthinkable that you're going to hide behind. That you're going to be able to hide them behind terrain. Jeez. Whew, yeah. That was a difficult sentence to say for certain reasons. I don't know why. So yeah, the Bloodborne are cool, and I've always wanted a reason to run them. I don't think you want to run a reinforce, or you also can't reinforce them anymore, can you?
Yeah, no. But 2 3s I could see for go and grab 2 objectives, so they can't possibly get more on turn 1.
Yeah, I can see 1 squad definitely. 2 might. I know, they die very easily though. But yeah, still your opponent has to dedicate resources to killing them if they're on objectives. So
yeah.
One
last quick shout out is I really want the buff wagons to be a thing, and the Mortis engine. They all got kind of like diversified a bit, but the Mortis engine is cool once per game Mortal Wound Bomb.
Yeah.
That every time a friendly Soulblight Gravelords wizard successfully casts a spell not unbound, or unbinds a spell or dispels an spell, place 1 reliquary counter on him up to a maximum of 6. And once per battle in your hero phase, you can say this unit, and every unit within 6 inches of it suffers a number of mortal wounds equal to that. So you can do a bomb that's just doing 6 mortal wounds against everything. If you drive him in the middle and protect him, kind of like I'm thinking Skaven style with the Grey Seer on Screaming Bell, where you've got units around, and then you just let it out. Which is pretty crazy. It's only enemy units that get hit by it. And then he's still got a shooting phase ability that's no longer a profile that does mortal wounds. And he's doing each time a friendly Soulblight Gravelord summonable unit wholly within 12 inches using Deathly Invocation battle trait, you can either heal up to D3 plus 3 instead of 3 if no one's been allocated, or that many much amount of healing. So he's kind of like a cheap version of Nagash that eventually explodes and kills something. Mm-hmm. I kind of like it. I've always loved that model. I don't get why he's got the Death Mage's keyword, or Malignant, what Malignant even does anymore. But yeah, of the 3 throne things, the Palanquin and the Coven Throne, I like the Mortis the best.
Yeah, same. The Mortis engine I can honestly see being played at some point, and even outside meme lists, but the other 2... I just really wanted them to be good. Honestly, I'm not gonna lie. I even forgot those other 2s that existed when we started this review, even though I was just talking about them an hour before we did the review, because they're just so lackluster, and they don't fill a slot that needs to be filled in the book.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that they even exist, but that model is so beautiful. It's hard to argue.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do agree with that. The model is amazing. Anyway. On to the army lists. So we're kicking off with a Legion of Blood list that I made, and I call it Ode to the Vampire Counts. I even used some old artwork. If you know this guy and you know his rules and you know his lore, then you're an OG Vampire Counts player, because he was amazing. He's Conrad. The funniest, I don't remember Warhammer lore to a T usually, but with him I really love a little story tidbit I want to share before I get into my list. So Conrad was a vampire count, and he actually had his mother beheaded at a certain point because she hadn't asked him for permission to birth him.
Oh wow!
You know, that small story tidbit just tells you enough about what kind of guy he is, right?
Was he a vampire at that moment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he was, and he's completely crazy. So every time he fought, you had to roll a dice, and on a 1, he would attack the closest target, and you could not really count on him doing what you wanted him to do. But on a 2 to 6, he got +1s to or rerolls to hit or something, and he was really good. I loved running him with Grave Guards.
I was hoping you were going to say that he was Vlad. I play since back when Vlad von Karstein was a thing. I don't know if you even remember that model.
Oh, of course, yeah. Vlad and Conrad von Karstein are in the same book. I have Vlad as my vampire lord. I don't even have the normal vampire lord.
He looks just like the original model. Looks just like a cartoony version of Dracula.
Yes,
which I love. Is amazing. I still have that model too.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I love Vlad. He's just way more popular than Conrad, and I understand why, because he was like almost a good guy, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're in Legion of Blood. Obviously, the strategy is defend what's ours, and the triumph is bloodthirsty because I had to. Not only because he's good, but if you're building a vampire list without bloodthirsty, shame on you.
Right. Nice.
I was considering taking on something else, and I'm like, nah, this is too good to pass up. Our general is a Lord on Zombie Dragon because you can combine it with the Doomed Minions trait. If you don't recall what that does, you get to choose D3 units at the start of the game, and if your general is within 3 inches of one of those units, all other units that hit them also hit on a 2+, which is very cool. I gave him the Cloak of Mist and Shadows to make his save unrendable, also unimprovable, so he'll always be on a 3+. And then the spells, you can either go with Vile Transference or Flaming Weapon. I think in this list, you might be better off with Flaming Weapon in the end, but Vile Transference is fine if you're playing in a meta where there's a lot of damage, but not spiky damage per se. Then obviously I brought Neferata because who's going to play Legion of Blood without her? And I took Prison of Grief, and I did a typo there as well. So the Prison of Grief spell is the spell that we were talking about in part 1 that makes a unit strike last. And on a 9+, the range increases from 12 to 24. We did talk about that spell in part 1 where we were saying that you're probably never taking that on a Necromancer because they just won't get into range, but Neferata will. And I will explain in a bit why I think strike last is quite important in this list. I also brought a normal Vampire Lord for 2 reasons. First of all, his ability to let a unit add 1 to their attack is very good with Graveguard, like extremely good. But also because in the current season that we were writing these lists in, it's season 2 of the 22-23 GHB. So you really need a Galician champion here for certain battle tactics and missions. So I gave him the aspect of Tunnel Master to get him to teleport around. I have 40 Graveguards split into 2 groups of 20. A block of 20 Death Rattle Skeletons as my anvil, I suppose, and then Black Knights as my screens. They are battle line in Legion of Blood, so I should have split them from the Fellbats there. And then Fellbats because I had 85 points left over, and I had to choose between either an Endless Spell, more Skeletons, or Bats. And I think I mean, both me and Ryan, we play a lot of Order armies, and when we have points left over, one of the suggestions is always, do you want Aether Wings?
Right.
And for Fellbats, it's kind of the same thing in my head. They're more expensive, but they fulfill the same role, right? They can capture objectives that your opponent has forgotten about or can't really hold, and they're a good screen as well. I put everything in 2 battle regiments, and I actually really thought about how I was going to form up these battle regiments, and I'll get into that in a bit. Okay, so what's the idea with this list? Obviously, it's hitting hard. It is mainly focused on the damage dealers, which are the Zombie Dragon and the Grave Guards. Neferata will do her thing, but as I mentioned before, she is not a blender. She is a buff beast. She enables things. And here with Neferata, she can keep the herself safe with her spell, but also her debuffs on hitting units that are close to her is very important. You also get to do the deploy shenanigans when you're deploying your army, which I'll talk about when I'm talking about the battle regiments. In her Prison of Grief, I've actually taken over the other two fantastic spells from the Lore of Death Mages, because every single time I've played with a Zombie Dragon and Graveguard, I've always had them in combat at the same time, and it always hurts to choose between your Zombie Dragon and your Graveguard as targets, because Graveguard still die quite easily. So with Prison of Grief, I could target one of those units that are targeting my Graveguard, for example, or the Lord on Zombie Dragon, and then fight with one of the ones first, and then not risk the other units. So that's kind of the idea that I was going for here. Graveguard hits on 4s now, but with doomed minions that really doesn't matter. So if you're combining them with the Lord on Zombie Dragon, they're always hitting on 2s and wounding on 3s, which is amazing. So those Graveguard both have great weapons and not shields.
Yeah.
The Deadwalker Skeletons I literally only brought to target something and for resurrection purposes, and the Black Knights are there because I like to screen with cavalry, as I do. Very unflavor-like, but I do the horizontal cavalry line to screen my armies. So yeah. And then the battle regiments, I split them in 1st regiment and 2nd regiment because I always drop Neferata and the bats and the Graveguard first, because Neferata I'm gonna redeploy anyway. Reset up anyway with her ability Mortec of Blood. The bats are fast, so even if I don't want to target those with my resetting up ability, they can go wherever they want. And Graveguard, I will always put one unit of Graveguards into the grave sites to get out of during reserve rolls, movements in the movement phase. So yeah, that's my list.
So question for you, would you, if this wasn't GC season, would you drop the Vampire Lord to get the White King on Steed to the Graveguard or Battle Line 2, because why not? And then maybe you have to swap the Felbats out to make this happen, but then the Black Knights get the ability? Or would you just not take the Black Knights because you don't... I mean, right now your battle line are Skeletons and the Black Knights.
Yeah. Obviously it depends on the season, right? Because battle line might become more important. Nowadays, battle line is mostly important to keep your GC safe, and 20 Death Rattle Skeletons will keep my Vampire Lord safe easily. I could take a White King, but then I have to make him a general, right? To make my Graveguard battle line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I could do it honestly, because the doomed traits, a doomed minions trait also would work fine, I suppose, on a White King on Steed. But yeah, that would be a fine choice as well. Yeah. I do like the Vampire Lord's ability though, whereas it used to be a command point. Now it's just a static ability that he can do once per turn. And I also like that he's a spellcaster. Having the flexibility to dispel some extra spells or to get Mystic Shield or Spirit Gale is always nice.
Yeah. Yeah, while you've got Felbats on the screen, I know we said we'd talk about it. You said they went up too many points to feel worth it. They went up 15 points from 70 to 85, and we know that they're Battle Line, Legion, and Knight. Before we talk about the balance of them real quick, I'll just flesh out the rest of what's happened to them. They get a +1 attack for the rest of battle if any models are slain by their attacks, and it stacks, so that keeps happening.
Mm-hmm.
They've got the Hunger, which they didn't used to have. Their melee damage profile, or their melee profile went up 1 damage, which doubles their output if they get through. And yeah, obviously they're still fast and still summonable. What is it about them that you feel like is overpriced? Like it's 3 for 5.
No, I don't feel like they're overpriced. It's just that for the way that I'm going to use them, and I want to use them in my games, I don't need all those buffs. I just want them to be as cheap as possible. Yeah, I probably phrased that wrong. It's good that you're pointing this out to me. I think the changes or the addition to the Felbats is nice, and paying 15 points for that is not expensive at all. For 85 points, 3 Felbats are fine. It's just that even with those buffs, they are not going to deal enough damage to be considered a scary unit for anyone, I think. So then you're back to, okay, what can I use them for? And that's screening and capping objectives. And I don't really need any of those damage buffs to do so. So that's the only reason why I'm not fully on the Felbats hype train or anything.
Yeah, I guess I'm psyched about them in Legion of Night because I like the idea, or Avengorii even. I like the idea of taking an all-flying army.
Yeah,
and
that's cool.
it's so easy to do an all-flying army in Soulblight with what you've got with the heroes, especially. I don't know. It's I felt like that's a good, like, I'd actually consider buying those models, but previously they just weren't. It didn't make any sense. So
they look amazing.
Yeah, they're cool models.
Yeah. Do you think this list would have a shot at success?
Definitely better than mine.
It's Legion of Blood, Ryan. So.
Well, I mean, we've got a lot of overlapping buffs here that are working together to accomplish a goal, which is kind of one of those things that you need. And Graveguard, that many Graveguards never bad. The Black Knights are good, especially if you can get the White King with them, but they still do a number of hard. It's something. And the skeleton and everything's summonable in your right.
Right?
Yeah, hey, the right-hand column there, is everything summonable?
Yep.
Yeah, so you're bringing back, all those units get to come back, or can come back.
Yeah,
which is great.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure whether I wanted to add a second zombie Dragon Lord here because it just meshes so well with the Legion of Blood traits. But you do, as you mentioned in part 1, the book really wants you to bring summonable units to make the most of the rules. Even though Legion of Blood enforces the idea of Hero Hammer, you're still running a Horde army with resummons.
Yeah. I think it's strong. I would certainly be open to playing this. Like, it's not too hordy at the end of the day. Like, 20 skeletons isn't that crazy. You could actually drop those skeletons down to just 10 so that you could take some extra points for something else, I guess, instead of the Felbat. But yeah, it looks good. I feel like it would beat my list.
Okay, speaking of which.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that you made this list, Ryan.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I wanted to do something that was a list, and unfortunately I feel like the way it currently and even was before is, except for Castellai, is a bit too Timmy-ish for me to feel like it's going to actually compete, which is one of the reasons I've never committed to Soulblight. But this is, my initial list was a full null list with a Legion of Night with a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon just like this, but he had the command trait that let him Deep Strike. Lady Annika just because she can. 5 units of 3 Vargeist, and I want to say it had 2 zombie dragons, because the zombie dragons, not the terror, can Deep Strike as well. I just don't think it's going to have enough juice to make it do what it wants to do. The buffs aren't overlapping, and they're Deep Striking not enough to guarantee you're actually going to get to do what you want to do unless you get a double turn. But anyway, this list was my second option here, and it kind of wrote itself. I mean, if I'm being honest, Avengorii, take what's theirs because it's supposed to be aggressive, and Bloodthirsty for charges, but I have 2,000 points, so it doesn't matter. It's a 1-drop list. Not 1-drop, 1 battle regiment, but I had to make it 3 drops because Lauka Vai and the Avengorii both have 10 or more wounds, so they couldn't go into the battle regiment. So I just put the Avengorii Lord and then the rest of the units into battle regiment, because keep in mind, Terrorgeist and Zombie Dragon, they lose the Behemoth battlefield role and become battle line, so they can go into troops. So anyway, it's the what's it called? The Zombie Lord on or the Vampire Lord on Zombie. He's got Monstrous Might, which we talked about this. I already forget which one this one was, but it was hard for me to choose because nothing was particularly obvious. I've almost got it. Here we are. So this is the subtract 1 for wound roll. Attacks me with melee weapon by friendly Avengorii monsters holier than 12. That's actually not hard to choose. It was the artifact that was hard. Maybe I went with Gorvar's Collar because it was the once per battle he strikes first. Makes sense. And then Vile Transference, what we already talked about. I agree with you. Flaming Weapon, for this kind of thing, I try to just use things in the book. Vile Transference is the one that gives you wounds back, or you heal after they take. I basically, as far as the spells, I wasn't being super creative here. There's three vampire spells, and I used all 3 of them, one for each of the 3 casters, just because why not? But honestly, they'll probably use their War Scroll spells often. So I've got Lauka Vai for all the things we talked about for what she does in Avengorii, and then the Vengorian Lord, which I'll go over in right now. So the idea with the Vengorian Lord, which we alluded to but didn't totally flesh out, is that he buffs non-hero monsters, and so he's got he's got a similarly improved combat profile like that of Lauka Vai. And he's got a once per turn ability, which allows a Soulblight Gravelords monster that's not a hero holier than it heals all of the wounds allocated to that monster. It's at the end of the combat phase, though. But you can do that for free 2 times per battle round, which is pretty neat. So it's keeping your monsters alive, and that's including him and Lauka Vai. No, sorry, it's a non-hero version. And then he's still got the -1 to rend, so we've got 2 versions of that. -1 to rend of the melee weapons, and it says to a minimum of nothing. No, it's the same wording. It says within 3 inches of this ability. So I can't stack it with him and Lauka Vai, but they could both be applying it to 2 different units or 2 different combats. He's got improved hunger, of course, and then his spell casting value 5, range of 24. Pick 1 friendly Soulblight Gravelords monster holier than range, and that unit can use the hunger ability from the caster's. So now you can heal it up to 6 wounds after it kills stuff, which means there's one thing where he's healing a monster fully at the end of the combat phase, and another one that's giving that monster the ability to hunger itself, which is cool. So basically everything in your arm is healing, which is pretty cool. I took 1 Terrorgeist and 1 Zombie Dragon just to mix it up, but I'd be tempted to take 2 Zombie Dragons just so I can deep strike both of them if I want to. They have different profiles now, but basically the Terrorgeist is the swingier version, and the Zombie. I also took 2 units of 3.
You dropped off there. And the Zombie Dragon?
The Zombie Dragon is the techier version.
Yeah.
They're more differentiated now than they were. And then 2 units of 3 Vargeist for the deep strike if I want to do it. And speaking of their War Scroll, you were talking about it. And maybe wanted some arguing for whether they're good or not.
Yes, please convince me.
12-inch move flying unit, 4 wounds, 5 up save. Their profile is 3 attacks, 3 threes, -1/2, which is average of 2.67 at -1 rend. But they're doing unmodified hit roll of 6 for it does exploding hits, so it's actually higher than that. And it's got the hunger now, which I don't. Oh, maybe it did previously. I don't remember. And it's still, of course, got the deep strike. I feel like having a flexible flying unit like that. I would never take them in 6s unless I put them in the Galician veterans battle core battalion, because then they would be able to get in. But I love that kind of movement. And keep in mind that they've got the 6-up ward too. So it's a 5-up save, 6-up ward, 4 wounds for 155 points, which you just played with eels, right?
Yep.
And for the first time, that's 180 points for 4 wounds on a 4-up save, but no ward save, 14-inch movement, worse bravery, and the attack profile is not much better than this. They do have the mortal wounds, but once you figure in the exploding hits and the fact that this thing is healing itself if it you don't outright kill it each model, plus it's benefiting from any vampire abilities if you happen to stack it. I didn't go that route, but I actually think Vargheists have a place in the army. They're not summonable, unfortunately, so you're not bringing them back. That's if they were summonable, let's say in one of the two sub factions like Legion of Night. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Really neat. But yeah, I admit they're not the strongest unit, but for an elite cavalry unit, they're actually pretty cheap. A lot of elite, like before, for example, the Griff, what are they called again? Demogriff Knights that I played with you in Steed. They're 170 for 3, and yes, they have a much better save than these guys. But even those guys, which are functioning on old, still a whole 15 points more for 3. So I don't know. And the deep strike, like a deep strike itself is one of those things that is hard to put a points value on. Unfortunately, they don't have the shooting ability that Nick's Flesh Eater Courts version of these dudes has, where they've got like a 12-inch range and then doing some amount of mortal wounds based off of a bravery check. But I still think that they could be fun to play. And you've got plenty of hammers already. And Lauka Vai and the Avengorii Lord are bad in combat. Plus, they're spreading their -1 rend to incoming attacks on your units. So if all your units are in, you got half your armies in with Lauka Vai and half with the Avengorii Lord. A lot of stuff is healing, and a lot of stuff is benefiting from that -1 rend. Plus, I've got a Horrorghast in here. So the Horrorghast, the idea is just to have an extra spell. I had some points. You're throwing the zombie, both the zombie dragon and the vampire lord on zombie dragon are turning off Inspiring Presence. And the Horrorghast is either also turning off Inspiring Presence if it gets in, or it's making extra models run. I think it still works that way, right? So you can be getting some extra work done with that. You could, of course, swap in Ravanax Gnashing Jaws if you just want Mortal Wounds or Quicksilver Swords, or if you really want to heal more, you could do. But I wouldn't, with how much healing's already going on. So it's a 3-drop list for very low model count. If I were to swap it out to make it a little bit more competitive, I'd probably suck it up and take some like Graveguard or some more summonable units.
Yeah.
Like getting rid of the Vargheists. The problem is I'd need something that's summonable that eats up a battle line slot because I've only got 2 battle line in this list.
Yeah.
So that's 400 something points, 410 points, I guess, that I'd have to play with. Getting rid of the Horrorghast would give me even more. So that's probably what you would do, but then you're not really leaving into the Avengorii. I think you are, because you can take 2 zombie dragons in any list if you want, like a zombie dragon and guys. Legion of Night as well. My list had 2 of them. So it doesn't. I want to do something that felt a little more.
Yeah.
I don't think it's super strong, but I think in a more casual setting, it would be really fun to play.
Yeah, I like the idea, and as you said, it just feels Avengorii, right? It doesn't even feel like a Soulblight army per se. It's just full on Avengorii to the point where it almost feels more like a Fek list than a Soulblight list, but still different enough to not be Flesh Eater Courts.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, Lauka Vai and Avengorii Lord obviously are pulling that. The funny thing is, the Avengorii Lord really only wants to run in a list where you've got non-hero monsters, which is really the Terrorgeist and Zombie Dragon. And the temptation, of course, is to take him in Avengorii, but then you also kind of need Vi. And then I'd argue you kind of also want a Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, which means that's eating up like half of your points already, and not giving you a whole lot of room to play with. The
Avengorii Lord is in a weird place now because he used to be taken in almost any lists. I didn't really understand why, because he never did anything for me. But he had his uses. But now I would only ever take him Avengorii. So a lot of people have their Avengorii Lord lying around are gonna be disappointed, I think, with the Avengorii Lord.
Or I do think the Terrorgeist and Zombie Dragon got better. They're still hitting on fours and hitting. I think it's fours and threes for a good chunk of their profile, which is unfortunate. Let's see, just real quick. The Terrorgeist is his melee weapons are 3 attacks, 4s, 3s, minus 2d6, and Skeletal Talons are 7 attacks, 4s, 3s, minus 1, 2. It did get better; those both got buffed. And he's got a better bracket now. And then the zombie dragon is basically the same thing with a few tweaks. The snapping maw is 3 attacks, 4s, 3s, minus 3, 3, and the sword-like claws are basically the same as the other one for the Terrorgeist.
Yeah.
So they did get a buff, but they're still easy to kill if you're not healing them. So I think that's where that Vengorian Lord stuff really comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
And then the -1 rend is functionally giving them +2 save if they get an all-out defense on them, right? So it's negating 1 point of rend and adding 1 point of save, which is for a 4+ save with 14 wounds. Nick would be a great person to talk to with this, and I wonder if he's already seen these war scrolls and has wondered if these are what's going to happen to the same dragons that are in Feck. I would imagine they'd have the same rules, and then the only thing different is what the writers add to it if on the war scrolls.
And will they retain their mount traits, for example?
Right, that too. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
We'll see.
Yeah,
but I had a good time studying the book and making these lists, even though I feel like I'm not a real Soulblight player at heart.
Yeah, it looks super thematic, and I think it would look menacing as well to deploy. Just the sight of those 3 dragon-like creatures, and then the 2 Vengorian Lords vibe thingies going on with the Vargeists in the sky. Yeah, scary stuff.
Yeah, so you're getting 5 monstrous rampages if you have access to that many. So
yeah,
that's really interesting.
Yeah, you can double up on one as well with Lauka Vai. Yeah, very cool, very cool. Okay. So we're reaching the conclusion here. So about the changes, I put that in because I always want to check whether you want to still leave us with something. Though I think we've basically covered everything by now. Is there anything else you want to point out, Ryan?
No, I do think this will be more fun to play against. And a lot of times when people look at battletomes, they think, well, a new battletome that comes out is only for the person playing it. And I actually think it more likely is those new battletomes are for the people playing against it, right? Yeah. And I have kind of almost to a joke at this point hated playing against Soulblight. I either win in an unexpected but kind of just because the matchup's great, kind of really strong way, or I just feel like I'm beating my head against the wall the whole time I'm playing because they keep bringing stuff back.
Yes.
And I feel like a number of the mechanics got more balanced for the person playing against them as well, which I feel like is generally true with a lot of the 3rd edition battles. So except Gits. This I feel like this also impact or is relevant for the next 2 things you have on this list. But I really do think that Soulblight at this point is going to be just more fun for both the pure person making the lists and the person playing against them. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. If you were starting with Soulblight right now, I think you would have an objectively good time. There is probably a little bit of a feel bad now to overcome for the experienced players that have already bought their armies because certain builds just really don't work anymore. Because in a competitive setting, you kind of saw people leaning into a full-on zombie list or a full-on Castle-like Blood Knights list, and now I think we're gonna be better off with a mixed detachment sort of thing. Which is cool because that's exactly what I like to play. So I like to bring a lot of different units, as you know, Ryan. Yeah. Talking about balance then, I think internally the book is quite good. Legion of Blood seems like the obvious winner, but all the other ones are almost equal, I would say. Virgos has some weaker rules, but has a lot more units to choose from. So that makes them inherently a little bit stronger as well. And externally, as I mentioned, I feel like people playing against this book would sort of experience the same army as they have always done. So you'll still see a lot of resurrection things. You'll still see vampires flying around on zombie dragons. You'll still see some wolves. So nothing majorly different there, just different power levels for the people piloting the army. And less randomization, which is always nice, right?
Yeah. I mean, even bringing back your units on a 5+ is now made less random, 4 or 3+ if it's your turn. So that's good. It's more reliable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If we're talking about how it's gonna turn out, I think for the impact on the meta, we should actually do a re-review later down the line. Right now, I honestly don't see this book making huge waves, or not like the certain books that have come out in the past. Kids.
Yeah.
Sorry, something in my throat. It'll still be fine though. I don't think it's gonna be something that's living on the bottom. Soulblight feels like an army that's gonna be smack dab in the middle for me personally right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, we kind of see that with a lot of the books that are the big books of a given Grand Alliance. So Stormcast kind of just lives in that place. I would argue Slaves does, especially once it, people figure it out. It's been performing a little poorly right now, but I think it'll be balanced out in the end. And this is another one of those books. I think it'll kind of just be in the middle. But that's not a bad thing when it represents a whole idea. The whole concept of this is like the home for Death Army.
Yeah. And I think most people who have experience playing against Soulblight will still be able to bank on their experience to get the upper hand. And same goes for the people piloting this book. If you've been playing a lot of Soulblight, the book hasn't changed that drastically to say that you're playing an entirely different book, but there's been enough minute changes to keep you interested, right? To keep the brain juices flowing, to plan different lists. Like, you can still run a lot of zombies, but you're gonna have to approach them in a different way now. I think that's fun. If you have a big collection of Soulblight stuff, you're gonna have a good time. If you just built the one list and you didn't want to buy any new models, that might get tricky.
Yeah, but to be fair, and I know this is coming from a place of privilege with someone who's got a large amount of collection and models, but
do you have a large collection, Ryan?
Yeah. I feel like if you get into Warhammer expecting, especially a niche-y build like only Blood Knights, no offense to those people, and then get mad when your niche-y thing changes. Like, we don't want the armies to be stale. It's not good for anyone for that to be a thing. And it's good to have to mix things up. It's one of the reasons why I don't want to buy spam lists. I was talking about this in my knapsack spam video. I feel like you're already kind of running the risk of being disappointed one day if you only lean into one thing. Mm-hmm. So GW, I think, knows that spamming, even though in a sense it's good for them to keep encouraging people to spam things so they just buy one kit a million times and buy another, I think they realize that's not sustainable. And they've been making battletomes much more well-rounded in 3rd edition, where spam isn't really the right way to go. And I appreciate that. So
yeah, same.
I think this is going to be good. Change is good, as long as it's not like particularly broken or particularly weak and you feel like your toys totally go away. I don't feel like this is a Fire Slayers where it feels like it's just the same book updated for 3rd edition. I feel like this feels like a new iteration, be an extreme iteration, but I do feel like it updates it and simultaneously shuffles things around enough, to your point, that it feels like you have to reapproach it and do some new stuff. So
yeah, and it's actually not that difficult to achieve that kind of feeling, because you just have to tackle the battle line stuff, things that you already had to take, and they've almost left like the typical core things like the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon. They've just left that alone, but then looked at the battle line and just swapped them around a little bit, or moved some rules here and there, so you can still experience the same things in a mixed army, but you have to use different units for that now, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And interesting, at least. Okay, so those are some great closing thoughts. I don't think we have anything else to add on top of that. So with that, we've reached the end of this video. Once again, I want to thank everyone for watching, and Ryan for being an amazing co-host. I know you've worked very hard on this. I've seen the notes that you take when a new book comes out, and with this many scrolls, man, that must have taken ages.
I mean, it's a labor of love until I got to like the underworld bands. I'm starting to like say, what's the point? But I don't want to miss out on something super valuable. But those get a little bit tedious because I'm like, I don't know. Every model has a different weapon and blah blah blah. But no, but it's good to be able to look at what's changed and also address just what's here and deal with it as though no previous book ever existed. So try to walk that fine line a bit.
Yeah. To be fair, the court, the vampire court there, from the
Crimson Court.
Crimson Court, that's the one. They actually look kind of good.
Yep. There are a couple that are good, yeah, for sure.
And the Askergan blades from Warcry also look absolutely fine, especially in a Bloods list like Castelai or something. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. That's a Warcry warband though, so those are usually better.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Anyway, guys, if you've enjoyed this, either part 1 or part 2, please leave a comment telling us what you enjoyed, what you're thinking about the army. I'm always super interested in what our community is thinking about. Leave a like, share it around, subscribe if you enjoy the channel, and visit us in the Discord if you want. We're going to open a thread for Soulblight Gravelords, or it'll already be open, obviously, for part 1, so we can continue the conversation there. See you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.